Today I have another interior design DIY. I'm going to show you how I made this snake covered mirror inspired by Seletti. So I started by creating a new document in Photoshop that was 8.5 by 11 since I'm going to be printing out these snakes. And then I went on Google and found some PNGs of snakes. I went for realistic looking ones in rainbow colors to match the inspiration. And I just moved the images around in the document to fit as many on the page as possible. You'll also want to make sure the document has no background so that when you print it out on clear paper, there will be no background and the snakes will be semi-transparent. This is the transparency paper that I'm using. It is for inkjet printers. You want to make sure you get the right kind of paper for your printer. And then once the image is printed out, you'll want to let it dry for at least 10 minutes. Here's the mirror I'm using. It is thrifted and it has a small scratch, so it's perfect. I can cover that up with a snake. Then before I start using the transparency paper snakes, I'm going to print out the same images on a regular sheet of paper just so that I can plan the layout, because once you start touching the transparency paper pieces, they get fingerprints and also the ink could still smear even if you give it ample time to dry. Now that I've kind of planned my layout, I'm going to cut the snakes out of the transparency paper. I put them on top of a white sheet of paper just so it would be easier to see where the lines were that I needed to cut. And I started by using an X-Acto knife, which works, but I ended up switching to scissors because they were just as effective. You just have to cut slowly. I only used the X-Acto knife for these inside parts that needed to be cut out, and I covered my hand with a plastic bag so as not to smear the ink. So I am using Mod Podge and a paintbrush to apply the snakes to the mirror, and you want to make sure you are placing the pieces ink side down on a plain or scrap sheet of paper and applying the glue to the other side. I did a very thin layer. I think you could also use spray adhesive, but I just used what I had, which was Mod Podge. And I had a little issue with placement here because I realized that I was trying to cover up this scratch and I didn't take into account that that center hole would be cut out on the transparency sheet. So I moved some things around and then finally placed my snake. Again, you don't want to touch this with your fingers, so I am just gently pressing it down with the back of the paintbrush so as not to smear the ink. And I had an accident when I was placing this one. I accidentally dropped it too soon and ended up with a bit of a glue smear around the edge, but I was able to clean it up with just a wet Q-tip. You just want to make sure that you are not touching the snake part just in case it could still smear. Finally, if you did end up with any smudges on the mirror, you can just use some Windex on a Q-tip and clean that up. This will also be how you'll have to clean the mirror in the future because you can't spray this directly with Windex anymore. So I'm going to hang it in a place that's not going to get fingerprints. And you're done. I hope you like this DIY, and I'll see you tomorrow with the next one.